Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do a deep dive into a Windows setup. This is on Windows 11 using WSL2 or Windows Subsystem for Linux. This is a follow-up video to the event that FourthBrain did in collaboration with Deep Learning on the 28th of September called Beyond Jupyter Notebooks, MLOps Environment Setup and First Deployment. So today we're going to go ahead and help you get your environment set up as if you just got a brand new job as a machine learning engineer on a Windows machine. And we're going to help you do your first deployment using FastAPI and Docker through your interactive development environment that will be contained within VS Code. All right, let's get right into it. First, we want to go to the FourthBrain GitHub and we want to open up the software dev for MLOps 101 repo. From here, we can see that first we've got a quick review of some Unix command line commands. It's important to specify Unix, especially for Windows users, because we need to make sure that we are aligning with Linux and Mac OS Unix terminal users. So first thing is that we will probably use CD or change directory today. We will also use sudo, or this is for super user privileges, and we may use mkdir for make directory. We'll also use clear quite a bit. Okay, we will be using, in terms of tools, we'll be using git for source control, and we'll come back to these git commands when we get there. We will also use GitHub. Moreover, we're going to use Conda and pip. Conda allows us to manage our environments, our virtual environments, and pip allows us to easily install packages. All right, so let's get started with Windows. Again, we're going to be set up on Windows Subsystem for Linux. There are a lot of resources out there to get WSL2 set up. So you're going to want to go ahead and follow this. I've already got WSL2 set up on my machine, so I'm not going to go through this right now. I've also got Windows Terminal installed. This is very easy to just get in the Windows Store, as well as the Ubuntu add-on for Windows Terminal. This is very easy to get in the Windows Store as well. So these are all there, and essentially you just want to make sure that you've got these key components in place before you get going. And as you can see, what we're essentially going for is when we open our terminal, if we click this down arrow here, that we see Ubuntu, and we can open it right up. So at this point, it looks just like a terminal, a Unix terminal that you would see on Mac or Linux, and one that does not have Anaconda coming into play as soon as we initialize the terminal. So we don't really need PowerShell there, and we'll keep just the Ubuntu terminal going. We'll sort of start to make this a little bit easier for us. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to go get an Anaconda distribution that's going to work for us. So that's what we're doing now with this wget command. And once we sort of download this, we want to install our Anaconda, and notice it's for a Linux distribution, and we're going to install it so that first we need to get through these license agreement terms. And we're going to answer yes. It says it will be installed here. And the bash command here is just sort of telling us that we want this to get going each time we open the terminal. So we'll see what that looks like here in just a second. But it's going to take a minute for Anaconda to actually install on our machine. And once it installs, then we'll sort of refresh the terminal, and we'll see what it means for Anaconda to actually be instantiated when we sort of open or refresh the terminal. That's what this source bash rc command is actually going to do for us. It's going to simply refresh the terminal. Okay, so this is going to take a little while, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that once we get Anaconda installed, we're actually going to go ahead and create our virtual environment with this command right here. And just at a high level, what this is doing is it's going to create an environment. We're going to name that environment, and it's going to install also Python as well as pip. Python, of course, is just going to allow us to code in Python. Pip is going to allow us to do package installation very, very easily using pip install. And then once we create our environment, we're going to then activate our environment. Let's see how far along we are here. And then we'll install the additional packages that we need. Okay, so we see a question here at the end. Do you wish the installer to initialize Anaconda 3 by running conda init? If we go back to here, it says when prompted, make sure to add conda to init. Yes, we do. So you'll see this is still the same setup as when we opened. However, if we sort of refresh our terminal here, you'll see that all of a sudden we are now using our base environment within Conda. But we don't want to use the base environment. Instead, we want to create our own virtual environment because it's that's really aligned with best practices. Let's keep our base environment fresh and clean. So we'll go ahead and call it MLOps course. That's what we'll call our environment here. And we will install Python 3.8. We'll install pip. Yes, please. Once we install our environment, we're going to go ahead and activate our environment. So you see base changes here to MLOps course. Very nice. Okay. Clear it again. Now we're going to make sure that we have the packages that we need installed. Now for this particular demo, we don't actually need matplotlib, nor really, I don't believe, do we need NumPy or pandas. They're great to have though. And certainly if you take our courses, you will need those. We will need, however, FastAPI, and we will also need Pydantic before the day is through. And I believe that is all. A little bit of, yeah, so we'll go ahead and install all of those. Make sure that we're good to go there. And we'll scroll back down here. Make sure that we have updated our apt install. So this is very similar to pip, but we're just going to make sure everything's updated here. And it's going to ask for the sudo password, so make sure that you have your password at hand. I've recently updated mine, so it shouldn't take too long here. And I'm going to make sure that I have Git, which that also shouldn't take too long because I have installed it already. And lastly, I'm going to download Windows VS Code, just like this. So in this case, I'm downloading Windows. Notice I'm downloading the Windows VS Code, not the Linux VS Code. And so that's why I'm going to go ahead and install it in a Windows file path. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch VS Code. And what I can do now, after launching VS Code, is I can actually open a terminal. So instead of using this terminal, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this terminal because we don't need it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and create a WSL Windows Subsystem for Linux terminal directly here in VS Code. So this all of a sudden, this is very nice. I'm going to increase the font size here just a tick, and I'm going to activate my MLOps course environment. Clear it out. Okay, so here I am. I'm doing exactly the same thing. Now I'm just inside of VS Code. The next thing to do is make sure that we have the appropriate extensions. So we're going to make sure that we have the IntelliCode extension installed. And go back down a size just for this portion. So I've already got my IntelliCode extension installed. Then I'm going to make sure I have Python installed. Python. Mine is already installed. Make sure yours is as well. I'm going to make sure that I have Jupyter Notebooks installed. Mine is already installed. Make sure that yours is as well. And now we are here. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and set the Python interpreter. Now you can open a new file, or you can just directly open the command palette here. And the command palette in a Windows system is done by Control-Shift-P. And we can go to Select Interpreter. And what we'll go ahead and select is we'll select that environment that we created. There's a few environments that I have here. Yours should only have about one environment. You don't want to select the root environment or the base environment. You want to select the one that you created that is in the location that Anaconda told you it would be installing itself in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and operate from there. And as we can see, now we are essentially good to go. We're ready to start coding. So we want to additionally make sure that GitHub is ready to rock. And the first thing that's kind of important to do is to set up your SSH, your secure shell key. And to do this on GitHub, you need to go to your GitHub profile. You need to go to Settings. Click down arrow, click Settings. You need to go to SSH and GPG keys. And you'll see that the SSH key, I've already created one for WSL2 here. I'm going to go ahead and create another one just for demonstration purposes. And the way to do that is to use this exact line. Keep it simple and type this in. Enter file in which you want to save it. That looks good. It's going to ask me if I want to overwrite because I already had one there. Yes, I want to overwrite. No, I do not want a passphrase. I'm sure I do not want a passphrase. And now I've got this great random art image here that's associated with my SSH key. And on Windows, the way for me to copy my SSH key, copy, paste, I can go in here, new SSH key. I'm going to call it the same thing as I did before. And I'm going to paste. Notice it starts with SSH RSA. Begins with SSH RSA. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Add SSH key. So now I've got this, and I can go back here. Looks like I'm all set up. And I'm really good to go on SSHing. Okay, great. Clear it out. Next, what I want to do is I want to create a new repository in my GitHub so that I have a place to put stuff. So I'm going to call this, let's call it Beyond Jupyter WSL2. And just according to this, I'm going to put the name. I'm not going to put a description. I'm going to make it public. I will add a README. I'll add a git ignore Python template, and I'll add an MIT license. So we're going to make it public, no description, add a README, git ignore Python. This means I'm going to ignore anything that's not Python related because that's what I'm coding in. And then I'm going to put an MIT license and create the repo. MIT license is very open, very useful. Okay. All right, so I've got my MLOps course, virtual environment. I've got my Beyond Jupyter WSL2 repo. Okay? Now, let's follow along here. What we want to do is we want to clone our repo down into our local machine and into our local development environment. So what we want to do is we want to open our terminal and navigate to a place where we'd like to make a directory to hold all of our files for this class. This isn't such a bad place to hold all of the files. However, a potentially even better place might be exactly where we want it. So if we go ahead and look at our file folders, what we want to do is we want to figure out, okay, wait, where is this environment? And the first thing that we can notice is Linux is here. So this is actually where we're going to work. You'll see Docker desktop stuff is in here, and we're actually going to work in Ubuntu because this is where we're simulating our Linux environment. Our Windows subsystem for Linux is here. In this home Greg Locke space, this is where Anaconda 3 resides. This is where everything that I've been doing so far really is. So you can see Anaconda 3 is here. If we go into env, then we see our MLOps course environment right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to work within this Greg Locke space. And we're just going to create a folder called MLOps development. Okay? So that's going to be our top level folder. And once I'm there, I basically just made a new directory. Once I'm there, I'm going to go into it and I'm going to create another folder called code. Okay? And from there, this is where I want to put my cloned repository. Okay, how do I do this? Well, I have to get here. All right. Now, where am I? If I do cd home, then my home is actually, home is a keyword in Linux, and home is right here in the Ubuntu home. Okay, if you look for home elsewhere, so for example, if you try to type in home/Greg Locke/Anaconda 3, it's not going to work. And the reason for this is because actually you'll notice that the WSL subsystem is at wsl.localhost/ubuntu/home. And now if I go to Greg Locke, now if I go to Anaconda 3, this will work. So notice I wasn't in my home directory there. Instead, I was in C users Greg L, and that is a place that is actually located, C users Greg L. That's a place that's located on my Windows system. So it's very tricky. It can be very tricky, but I recommend going ahead and working directly on the subsystem. So that way you know where everything is and where to find everything. It can get kind of tricky here. All right, so rather than work there, I want to work from my WSL space, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the MLOps development and code folder that I just created. So I'm going to cd into MLOps, or into Greg Locke/MLOps development/code. I will cd into Greg Locke. So let's just see where I am exactly. I'm already in Greglock, so I'm going to cd into MLOps development and then cd into code. So the home was actually, the home that I get to with this tilde was actually home/Greglock. Okay, worth noting. All right, so now I'm here, and what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and clone this repo down. And after playing with this a little bit earlier, it became clear that the best way to clone this repo down was to not use the HTTPS, but to use this SSH. We did set up our SSH, so we can do this straight away. And once we clone this down, then we can actually see if we're working locally in a folder that has this. So for example, we can open this folder now, and we know kind of how to get there now because we have our location here, so we can copy and paste it like this. And there it is. We've got our Beyond Jupyter WSL2. It's actually easier to look at directly in VS Code. We're going to go ahead and view our terminal again. And we're going to make sure we're using WSL. We don't need PowerShell. We're going to activate our MLOps course. And you'll notice we've got our git ignore Python, we've got our license MIT, and we've got our README, just like we told our repo to set up. All right, so now what we can do is we can do something very simple. We can create just a new file. Let's go ahead and create just a quick Jupyter notebook. Let's make sure everything's working here. X equals 8, Z equals 10. Let's go ahead and just print X times Z. See if we are in a space where we feel comfortable. And you know, we've selected our interpreter before, but if it asks us, we're going to go ahead and select the same interpreter when it asks us to select kernel, and we see, boom, there it is. So we are coding in Python through a Jupyter notebook in VS Code at this point. And what we can do is we can save this as a Jupyter test, and let's go ahead and put it in our remote repo. So now you see it's in there. Once it's in there, you'll notice it's not up here in GitHub yet. Why not? Well, this is where we go back to our git commands. Because now that we've cloned and we've created something new, now we need to add. And we can go ahead and add our Jupyter test.ipynb. But of course, we have to be in the right Git repo first, Beyond Jupyter WSL2. Then we can git add. Then we can git commit, and we're just going to put a message here, test commit for Jupyter Notebook. And then we're going to push our commit to our remote repository. And the command we need for this, it is git commit, but we're going to see a few more details here down in this next part, where this repo that we have up, this allows you to clone a really fun game mystery repo that we have down, and then to, you know, have some fun with that. But what we want to do, you know, right now is we want to make sure that we're set up to be able to remote connect to our GitHub account from our local environment. So before we commit, we want to make sure that we have git remote set up. So you see we've got our origin branch with fetch and push options. So, you know, fetch and push. And notice that's what we're trying to do here. we're trying to push. Okay, so we have a push option now. And we also want to set up our global configuration with our email that we use in GitHub. And that way my name will be on everything. We've added, we've committed. There's no local dev branches to merge, and so we don't need to worry about that. All we need to do is we need to do git push origin main now. And you'll see that now all of a sudden we have our Jupyter Test Notebook up in GitHub, and voila, we are connected from the ground to the cloud. And you just did your first git push, so congratulations. And feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Okay. Ready for the next thing? Okay, here's what we're going to do next. We're going to take a FastAPI app and a Docker container app from Deep Learning, and we're going to clone it down, and we're going to get it running. So we're going to go ahead and go into Deep Learning's MLOps Specialization GitHub, Course 4, Week 2, Lab 1. And this is to deploy an ML model that's a simple wine classification data set model. It's this data set. In other words, it's, there's some more details on it here. The wine recognition data set. It's pretty straightforward. And essentially, you give it 13 parameters. It predicts which class of wine it is, class 0, class 1, or class 2. And so let's go ahead and clear this out. And how this lab works. Well, the first thing that we need is we're going to git clone. And notice we'll use our SSH, our secure shell, for this as well. And notice, since we're in code, well, actually, we're in Beyond Jupyter WSL2, which, that's kind of fun. So we're working in Beyond Jupyter, and now, you'll notice if we sort of refresh this, we see our machine learning engineering right there. And look at that. We're in Beyond Jupyter WSL2. So what we can do here is we could push this back up. We're not even going to worry about that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into Course 4, Week 2, Lab 1, and we're going to look a little bit closer at these files in the no batch. So this is starting to get a little bit crazy. So what I'd recommend is actually, opening this directly. And the easiest way to do that is just to open folder. We'll drill down Course 4, Week 2, FastAPI Docker. That looks good. And as you noticed from before, we'll have to reopen our terminal. We'll have to conda activate MLOps course, and we will be able to now look at everything in here very nicely. Okay, so as you saw a little bit earlier, the reason that I wanted to install FastAPI and Pydantic were basically to be able to run this FastAPI app. Oh, and there's one more when we look at this part 1 prediction request. This sort of tells us how to build the FastAPI web app file. And the next piece of this that we want to pay attention to is what we need to do to actually call the app. Okay, so we'll notice that we've got this unicorn main : app. --reload. And what this is specifying is that if we are in the appropriate folder, which means in the same directory as the main.py file, in this app folder, all we need to do is we need to call main:\app. And you'll see that what we're calling is we're calling this app. Okay? So if we are in this folder, which means we need to cd in, we need to cd into no batch, into app, then we can actually call uvicorn main:\app if we pip install uvicorn, and the other library that we also will need is sklearn. Additionally, in order to make this run directly without Docker right now, the important modification we need to make is that since we're already in the app folder, we don't need to specify drilling down into the app folder to find the wine.pickle file. So we can eliminate this, we can save this, and we can now run uvicorn main app. And so we should say application startup complete if everything's working properly. It allows us to click into this, into our browser. Congratulations, your API is working. We can do \docs here, and we can open up our wine class prediction. We can try it out with a few of our wine examples. For class 0, let's see if we predict class 0 here. Execute, and we are predicting class 0. Let's try one more. Predict class 2. Execute, and we are predicting class 2. We are in business. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close this out now. And the last piece of this is we want to go ahead and put our app back. We want to go ahead and cd back out to the no batch folder. So now we've got our app, and we've also got our Docker file. And when we Dockerize, we want to understand what's happening in the Docker file. First of all, we're saying, okay, we want this to run light. We want to use a very simple Anaconda version of Python 3.7. We want to use a simple set of requirements with FastAPI, uvicorn, and scikit-learn. And we want to make sure that we're using port 80. And you'll see here, I've got app.main:\app. So this is now app.main:\app. Okay? All right, so this is what the Docker file is specifying, and I'm calling uvicorn in the command line the same way as I was before, only I'm doing it through the Docker container. So the real trick here is to go ahead and do the image build of the Docker container, just like this. And since I've already built the image, it will actually go relatively quickly for me. And you'll see that it says the command docker could not be found in this WSL2 distro. So what we need to do is we need to install Docker Desktop, and we need to get it opened up and ready to rock. Once it's opened, because one of the things to note about Docker Desktop for Windows is that it says one of the requirements is the WSL2 backend. So it works very well with WSL2. We're going to go ahead and delete everything that's in here. And so once I'm open, once I'm operating here, my Docker Desktop, I'm connected. It says connected to hub. Now if I run my docker build command, now I can actually build my image here. Once I build my image, I can run my image. And this is sort of this command docker run happening here. Since I've specified port 80, one of the important points here, otherwise you will run into an error, is to specify port 80 within your Docker container. Once it's running, you can see, no such file or directory wine.pickle. That was because we are still waiting for me to click save on this since I changed app back. So we're going to save this, and we're going to go ahead and delete this, go back to our image, run it again. Now once we're good to go here, of course we can't just run the same image again because the image contains the main.py file. We have to create the image again. So we're going to make sure our container is stopped, our image is deleted. We do a new build, and we're going to now run this new build that has the appropriate main.py file in the container. So cool little Unicorn is a cool little learning there from that little mess up. So Unicorn is now running on HTTP, basically on localhost, and so we can actually access this through localhost port 80. It says congratulations, your API is working. Now head over to localhost port 80/docs, and we can see we've got the same setup with the FastAPI backend, the Swagger UI backend, and we can try out our last wine example, which is class 1. Execute, and we are predicting class 1. And there we have it. We've got our interactive development environment set up with our file explorer, our ability to look at Python files and notebook files, and our ability to use the command line directly. We're going to go ahead and shut down our containers. We're going to go ahead and close out our applications. We're going to clear this out, and now we're basically ready to rock and roll for whatever MLOps development we may need to do in the future. Of course, we could push our new development back up to our repo, although I'm not going to do that today. And the one thing that I want to just announce to you is that if this was of interest to you, if you're interested in going deeper on Git, on how to take an app like this and make it something really cool, we've got a brand new event coming up where I get to work with some of our amazing instructors directly live, another collaboration with Deep Learning coming up on Wednesday, November 9th, where Chris and Melitza will help me out talking about branch development in GitHub. We'll go a lot more deeper than we did here today, and we'll also take that FastAPI and Docker framework, and we will use it to deploy a cool state-of-the-art text-to-image diffusion model. So definitely register for that and check that out if you get a chance. I hope this was useful to you. I hope this helped you out. I wish you the best in your career as a machine learning engineer. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We've got more content like this coming out all the time, and we're trying to do more and more of it. So if you have any ideas, leave it in the comment or email me directly at greg@fourthbrain.ai. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers.